I'm going to start this morning by reading from Swami Kriyananda's autobiography, The New Path, and this is from the chapter, His Last Days, talking about, Swami Kriyanandaji was present in Los Angeles when Master left the body. So this is talking about those last days. And I'm beginning to read now. On Tuesday, March 4th, the Indian ambassador and his party visited Mount Washington in Los Angeles. Swami says, I served Master and his guests in his upstairs interview room. During their visit, Mr. Ahuja, India's consul general in San Francisco, remarked to Master, ambassadors may come and ambassadors may go. You, Paramahansaji, are India's real ambassador to America. How true that is. Thursday evening, March 6th. So today, March 6th, this was 64 years ago. Not that long. For some of us, it was within our lifetime. Thursday evening, March 6th, Master returned from a ride in the car. He had asked Clifford Frederick, who was driving, to take him onto Rome Drive behind Mount Washington. There, gazing at the main building, he remarked quietly, "It looks like a castle, doesn't it?" The monks had just finished their group practice of the energization exercises when Master's car entered the driveway. As we gathered around him, he touched each of us in blessing and then spoke at length about some of the delusions devotees encounter on the path. Master said, "Don't waste your time. No one can give you the desire for God. That is something you must cultivate yourself. Don't sleep a great deal. Sleeping is the unconscious way of contacting God. Meditation is a state beyond sleep, superconsciousness as opposed to subconsciousness. Don't spend too much time joking. I myself love to laugh, but I keep my sense of humor fully under control. When I am serious, nobody can tempt me to laugh. Be happy within, grave but ever cheerful. Why waste your... Just going in the wrong direction. Okay. Come on. Why waste your spiritual perceptions in useless words? When you have filled the bucket of your consciousness with the milk of peace, keep it that way. Don't drive holes in it by joking and idle speech." He went on, "Don't waste time on distractions, reading all the time and so on. If reading is instructive, of course it is good. But I tell people, if you read 1 hour, then write 2 hours. Think 3 hours and meditate all the time. No matter how much this organization keeps me busy, I never forgo my daily tryst with God." End quote. Swami goes on. In the basement, minutes later, Master saw a box of green coconuts that had just arrived from Abby George's brother in Florida. Master said, "Back at the car, Divine Mother was trying to tell me these coconuts had come, but I didn't listen. I was talking too much." Master, laughing genially, opened a coconut and drank from it. But his enjoyment seemed to me somehow tinged with unreality. I looked into his eyes and saw them deep, still, completely untouched by what he was doing. In retrospect, it seems like the heartiness of one who knew he was bidding us goodbye, but didn't want us to know what he was doing. Catching my glance, he became all at once almost grave. "I have a big day tomorrow," he said. Walking toward the elevator, he paused at the door, then repeated, I have a big day tomorrow. Wish me luck. The following day, March 7th, 1952, he came downstairs to go out. He was scheduled to attend a banquet that evening at the Biltmore Hotel in honor of the Indian ambassador. Imagine, he said, I've taken a room at the Biltmore. That's where I first started in this city. Then again, he repeated, wish me luck. Master had asked me to attend the banquet with Dick Haymes, a popular singer and movie actor. Dick had recently become a disciple and had taken Kriya from me. Years ago, Master had said, when I leave this earth, I want to go speaking of my America and my India. And in a song about India that he had written to the tune of the popular song, My California, he paraphrased the original ending with the words, I know when I die, in joy I will sigh for my sunny, grand old India. Once, too, in a lecture, he had stated, a heart attack is the easiest way to die. That is how I choose to die. This evening, all these predictions were to prove true. Master was scheduled to speak after the banquet. His brief talk was so sweet, so almost tender, that I think everyone present felt embraced in the gossamer net of his love. Warmly he spoke of India and America and of their respective contributions to world peace and true human progress. He talked of their future cooperation. Finally, he read his beautiful poem, My India. Throughout his speech, I was busy recording his words. Keeping my eyes on my notebook, he came to the last lines of the poem, where Ganges, woods, Himalayan caves, and men dream God. I am hallowed. My body touched that sod. Sod became a long, drawn-out sigh. Suddenly, from all sides of the room, there came a loud cry. I looked up. What is it? I demanded of Dick Haymes, seated beside me. What happened? Master fainted, he replied. Oh, no, Master. You wouldn't faint. You've left us. You've left us. The forgotten playwright in me cried silently. This is too perfect a way for you to go, for it to mean anything else. I hastened to where Master lay. A look of bliss was on his face. Virginia Wright was stooped over him, trying desperately to revive him. Mr. Ahuja, the Consul General, came over to me and put an arm around my shoulders to comfort me. Never, dear friend, will I forget that sweet act of kindness. They brought Master's body to Mount Washington and placed it lovingly on his bed. One by one, we went in, weeping, and knelt by his bedside. Mother, cried one of the disciples, oh, Mother, indeed Master had been a mother to us all, and how much more than a mother. Another disciple gave me an anguished look. How many thousands of years it took, marveled another disciple, gazing upon him in perfect awe, to produce such a perfect face. Later on, after we'd left the room, Faye remained alone with Master's body. As she gazed at him, a tear formed on his eyelid and slowly trickled down his cheek. Lovingly, she caught it in her handkerchief. She would preserve it always. In death, as in life, he was telling his beloved disciple, and through her, the rest of us, I love you always. through endless cycles of time, unconditionally, without any desire except for your happiness forever in God. In the last months of his life, people, close disciples, sensed that he was going. And Swami said, he asked him once, in a very famous statement, Master, after you leave this world, will you be with us just as much as you are now? And Master's reply, of course, was, to those who think me near, I will be near. Another time, a disciple asked him, how will we carry on without you? And in response to that, Master wrote the beautiful poem, When I Am Only a Dream. And if you haven't read it, it's in his beautiful book of poems, Songs of My Soul. And you can read it. But the poem begins this way. I come to tell you all of him, and the way to encase him in your bosom, and the discipline that brings his grace. And then he goes on, but those two things, I come to tell you how to encase him in your bosom and the discipline that brings his grace, because those two things are vitally important. In fact, that's how he sums up what he will leave for us when he's no longer physically present. But you know, I'll take a little aside here, two asides. Recently, a friend of mine was at Ananda Village, was going through some old boxes of archival things that had been in storage in a basement at Ananda Village. And she found something quite remarkable. And she wasn't sure what it was. She had a feeling, but she didn't know for sure. But she gave it to me, and it will go in the museum we have for Swamiji and Master at Ananda Village. But it was the little notebook that Swamiji was writing in at the time of Master's Mahasamadhi, because he was writing that, and then it just was done. And then on the next page, Swami wrote, called this person, that person, this person, to inform them. But it was such a treasure. But when we say Master is no longer in the body, we have to remember, to those who think me near, even if you're not a disciple. You may have heard this story, but we have a woman that lives at Ananda Village, and her mother was from Mexico. Her mother is a very devout Catholic, beautiful, devoted soul. And she was visiting her daughter at Ananda Village maybe 10 years ago this happened. And she went for a walk. And she's an elderly woman, this mother. And she was gone for a long time. And her daughter started to get worried. Had she gotten lost? Had she fallen down? No. Finally she came back, but she couldn't speak. And her daughter thought she had had a stroke. And she said, Mama, let me call a doctor, let me call a doctor. And all she could say was, no doctor, no doctor. And she just sat in a chair, and then her daughter sat at her feet. And then she said, I began to feel, she wasn't my mother, but God was present there. And finally, after some hours, her mother said, I was walking in the field, and Yogananda appeared to me. She's not a disciple, she's not a Kriyaban, but she's a soul that loves God. And that's who Master comes to. And Irene said to her, her daughter said, but Mama, you don't speak English, you only speak Spanish. And she said, we talked. And she said, what did you talk about? She said, oh, I just asked him about my 12 children, how to take care of them. They're all grown now, but how to work with them. And we talked about different things. And then I asked Yoganandaji, "Do you come here often?" And he said, "Oh yes, I'm here all the time." And yet, how few people see him, because their hearts, they haven't encased him in their bosom the way this very pure soul had encased God in her bosom, though she wasn't a disciple, didn't follow his path at all. And so to encase him, to encase God in our bosom, first of all, we need to make his presence in our heart the primary presence. It is said that the spiritual path is like a razor's edge. It is too narrow for both the ego and God to walk on it. And so if we want God to be in our hearts, we have to look at what space is being taken up by the ego, by our desires, by our need to get recognition, by our need to be loved, and by our need to succeed. All these things that are accoutrements of the ego. And we have to say, that's taking over the kingdom of my heart, and it's pushing out God. And so we need, it's not that we're bad, it's not, the spiritual path truly is not about guilt, it's not about thinking, oh, I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't do that. It's about loving. It's about loving God more than we love ourselves. And that's what it comes down to, more than the need for any recognition to this little separate spark of God that we call ourselves. And that's all it is, a little separate spark of God. So first, to encase him in our bosom, we must weed out everything. It's like a garden. If we let the weeds of ego grow, we choke the beautiful little plants of God consciousness that are trying to come forth, that are trying to make a beautiful divine garden in our heart. Another way to encase him in your bosom is to realize how precious that reality is. And so that it's more precious than any tendency, and we have to, any desire to move outward into the world of delusion. So we have to build a protective fence, in a sense, in the beginning around our God's presence in our heart. Don't let anything compromise that. You know, once Swami tells the story in the New Path, some woman was a good disciple, but she wanted to be fair-minded. And so if somebody would say something to her against her guru, she would just let it be. She wouldn't contradict it or oppose that thought. And Master said, that's not good enough. That's compromising my presence in your heart. If you love something, if you believe in something, you protect that vibration, you protect that reality, and you don't do things that would in any way diminish it. If someone speaks critically of your guru, it's not enough to say that's your opinion and I have my opinion. You have to defend these things. And I know in my own life, in the history of Ananda, we have had to defend our right to serve Master, to share his teachings. And Swamiji said to us, it will be one of the most important things you do to stand in defense and to not let that presence in any way be compromised. And how is it compromised? It's the presence of God in our heart is compromised whenever we criticize another person, when we think critically, when we are selfish or greedy. All of those hurt the God within us. And when we have moods, and we think, oh, I can have the right to my own moods. Master said, when you have moods, I suffer, because then I can't get into your heart. And so watch that too. catch it before it goes into criticism or negativity. Even-minded and cheerful. It sounds, in a way, simplistic. It sounds, you can shrug it off. But in those few words, Master has summed up the attitude, the proper attitude of how to keep God's presence always in your heart, to encase Him in your bosom, to cast out the ego, to protect God's presence. And then also, our path, Master said, I love it. I prefer a soul to a crowd, but I love crowds of souls. So our path isn't a proselytizing path. We're not just trying to say, come, join our church, sign on the dotted line. We don't care about that. Swami always said, I don't want to convert you to anything but your own higher self. And so we need to keep our devotion, in a sense, private. We don't have to show it to the world. I remember many years ago, I don't know if Sadhana Devi remembers this, but she and I went down to visit some relatives of mine who lived in San Francisco. And they were very materialistic, still are materialistic people. And they were kind of challenging us, they were belittling the spiritual things we were doing. And because they were my cousin, I tried to kind of explain it and defend it. But finally they turned to Sadhana Devi, who is a person who keeps her consciousness in her own heart. And they said, well, what about you? What do you have to say about these teachings? And she just said, I don't talk about it, I just do it. And I thought that was the best thing anybody could have said. And so if you're mixing with people that are skeptical or, trying to diminish your faith, don't associate with them. Just say, I have my beliefs. I have my beliefs. If you want sincerely to know about them, I'll share them. But if you're just going to mock them, better to keep it to yourself. And so those things, to encase Him in your bosom, and the discipline that brings His grace. We talked about techniques, but discipline, it's not in the sense of harshness or, in the Christian tradition, the seekers after God were always, beating themselves and doing all these things. And it's in the Hindu tradition as well. This wasn't our path. It wasn't Master's way. Discipline is not hurting the nature. Discipline is, again, weeding out those things that keep you from happiness. And so the discipline is a way of life. And the more you do it, the more you enjoy it. The discipline of living simply, of not acquiring a lot of material possessions. You all in India, I hope you never lose this. One sees the trends of materialism coming, but the simplicity with which life is lived here. You go into a person's home, and it isn't cluttered with things, just what is needed, what is lovely, what is beautiful or uplifting. But the discipline to live simply, the discipline to live dharmically, even if you're tempted to compromise it in the workplace, compromise your values. It's not about if you get ahead in the world. It's about how you stand in the eyes of God. That's the final judge. Master said, blame does not make me worse. Praise does not make me better. I am what I am before my conscience and God. And so to have the discipline to be an honorable person, no matter what, no matter how tempting it is to bend the corners, to tell the little white lie, the discipline that brings His grace is to stand always with that dedication within you that helps you to feel, I have not pulled away. Meditation, in a sense, is the easiest part of the discipline, because it's rather straightforward. Okay, this is this technique, this is that technique. But what do you do when your boss comes to you and says, I want you to put a different figure on the accounting numbers on this page? That's not so easy. That takes discipline. And you say, even if you fire me, I will not do this because it's not honest. That's the discipline that brings His grace, and that's what makes spiritual heroes. And then I want to say something now to all of you. Most of you are from, on a more personal level for all of you, most of you are from Bangalore, Chennai. Few friends have come from other places, but Delhi. But you're all involved with the work of Ananda Sangha. In this chapter from which we read earlier, Swamiji presents a very profound and interesting concept. He says, just as out in the vastness of space, when there are these cosmic gases formed of random and widely spaced atoms. He said these atoms, sometimes there could be a mile between one atom and another atom, so their magnetism isn't strong enough to draw them together into a larger molecule. But he said occasionally two atoms will come in association and they'll form a little molecule, and then their magnetism increases and they'll form another, and another will come, and it gets larger and larger, and then finally the mass can be so great that the magnetism can be millions of miles to draw others to this. And then when that happens, there's a implosion and a great star is formed. He said such a one is like Yogananda. He is a great star in God's firmament, in God's heavens. His magnetism is so great that he draws all of us, random little atoms floating in space. I know that's what I was. If it hadn't been for the magnetism of the Master, I would have spent a very empty and meaningless lifetime. Then he goes on to say, Swamiji, that drawn to this great star are spiritual families. And these families, again, it's not personal. It isn't like our human family, but it's families of vibrational affinity. And 1968, 1969 in America, there are souls sitting in the front row here. Jaya, Sadhana Devi, Jyotish, Haridas Roma, Dharmini and Dharmaraj came a little later. But we came from all over America. We didn't know each other. We weren't friends, but we were drawn for some reason into this family. We were all basically new on the path. Some had studied a little bit with Swami, but we were basically all beginning, just as all of you are beginning. And Master came to America first to start his mission, because that was the will of Babaji. And if you read an autobiography of a yogi, it says, Babaji knew the complexity of the materialistic consciousness of the West and the impact that it would have on India, which we see now. And he wanted to bring spirituality to the West so that there could be some basis for coming together. So Master came to the West, and he drew this family of souls. And here we are, Jaya, Sadhana, we've known each other since 1969. We rarely talk, we rarely email or write or phone, but there is a bond of vibrational affinity that unites us. And now we come to India, and we come to all of you, Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi. You are coming together just as we did in 1969 in spiritual families. And it's not based on similarity of education or anything. You have mastered that great star in the firmament has drawn you into his family. And you have a responsibility to this great country of India. We can come here to plant seeds, but truly, Master said Indians would organize themselves when the teachings were brought. And I say this as a call of action to all of you. It is within your heart, and it is your dharma to magnify the vibrations of Master that have come back to India through this spiritual family of Ananda Sangha. And through the association, Master said, many souls find freedom by their satsang with each other. So we have seen, both in Chennai, here in Bangalore, the wonderful spirit of service and devotion that you have all demonstrated. But I just want you to understand it's more than that. There is a purpose of you all coming together, all of us coming together. It's the purpose of these great ones. And it's to enhance this magnetism of this great star of our Guru, and to draw others into the magnetism of that spiritual family that will bring all of us to liberation. When I look at my Guru Bhais who came in the first years, next years, I look at them and say, they're transformed. They have become saints before my eyes. And so it is with all of you. You have a great purpose, more than just doing what your boss says, more than just taking care of your family. You have a great purpose. And try always to remember this, because it is a truth that is beyond our daily perception, and yet always there. The Guru is always, it's not just for a few who came. This is a mission of our masters to transform the planet, and you are a vital part of making this happen in India. We will do what we can to share with you, but you have to take it on, and you have to do it. And through your example of people facing the daily challenges of life in India, to say still, in spite of all of that, we never abandoned our search for God realization. And this is why Master came. It's why he ended this lifetime speaking of my America and my India, this great family in God that he has given us. More than human relationships, more than nice conversations and pleasant teas, there is a very important purpose. And I think if you meditate on this and look in your own heart, I think you will realize that you have known this all along. So God bless you.